Imagine, if you will, a world that constantly bombards you with the message that you must care about everything. You are told to be happier, healthier, richer, and more admired than everyone else. Yet, this relentless pursuit of positivity often leaves us feeling more inadequate than ever. Welcome to the counterintuitive philosophy of Mark Manson's profound work, where the secret to a good life is not about giving a fuck about more things, but rather giving a fuck about less. Let us explore this together, step by step, as if we are sitting down for a candid, narrative conversation about what truly matters, stripping away the superficial to find the core of human experience. To understand this, we must first look at Charles Bukowski, an alcoholic, gambler, and poet who spent decades facing crushing rejection. His eventual success did not stem from a relentless, Hollywood-style determination to be a winner, but from his absolute, unflinching comfort with being a failure. He accepted his flaws and wrote honestly about them. This illustrates a profound psychological principle known as the backwards law, popularized by philosopher Alan Watts. The backwards law suggests that the more you desperately pursue feeling better all the time, the less satisfied you become, because the pursuit itself reinforces the fact that you lack it in the first place. Wanting a positive experience is, paradoxically, a negative experience. Conversely, accepting a negative experience is a positive experience. When you stop fighting your anxiety about being anxious, or your guilt about feeling guilty, you short-circuit what Manson calls the feedback loop from hell. You simply accept that feeling like shit is a natural part of life, and in doing so, you free yourself from the secondary, self-inflicted suffering of hating yourself for feeling bad. Not giving a fuck does not mean being indifferent or apathetic. It means being comfortable with being different and reserving your care only for what is truly important, immediate, and aligned with your personal values. This brings us to a fundamental, inescapable truth: happiness is a problem. We often operate under the premise that happiness is an algorithmic equation, a destination we reach once we acquire the right job, partner, or amount of money. But as our metaphorical disappointment panda would harshly remind us, problems never truly go away, they merely get exchanged or upgraded. The billionaire has money problems, and the person struggling to pay rent has money problems. The former simply has better, more manageable money problems. Therefore, happiness does not come from a life devoid of problems, but from the active, ongoing process of solving them. Since struggle is inevitable, the most critical question you can ask yourself is not what pain you want to avoid, but rather, what pain are you willing to sustain? What struggle are you willing to endure for the sake of something meaningful? Many people fantasize about the reward, like the summit of a mountain, but they do not actually want to endure the grueling climb required to get there. You must fall in love with the process, not just the victory. As we navigate this reality, we must dismantle the modern myth that you are inherently special. For decades, society has pushed a narrative of exceptionalism, handing out participation trophies and telling everyone they are destined for greatness. This has bred a culture of entitlement, where individuals feel they deserve the rewards of success without enduring the requisite struggle. Entitlement is a fragile defense mechanism. People who are truly secure in their self-worth do not need to constantly prove their superiority or hide behind delusions of grandeur. True self-worth is not measured by how positively you view your achievements, but by how honestly and constructively you confront your negative traits and failures. When we accept that we are, for the most part, quite average, we are liberated from the exhausting pressure to be extraordinary. This acceptance allows us to focus our limited energy on what is genuinely meaningful, rather than chasing a hollow, media-driven illusion of greatness. Let us now navigate into the profound, often uncomfortable territory of taking responsibility. Imagine waking up to find a newborn baby abandoned on your doorstep. You did not cause this situation, it is entirely not your fault. Yet, you are now faced with a series of choices. This illustrates the crucial distinction between fault and responsibility. Fault is anchored in the past, dealing with who created the problem. Responsibility, however, exists in the present moment. It is about how you choose to respond to the reality in front of you right now. Many people hesitate to embrace responsibility because they confuse it with blame. But the truth is, while you may not be to blame for the hand of cards you were dealt, be it a genetic predisposition, a traumatic childhood, or a sudden tragedy, you are absolutely responsible for how you play those cards. When we refuse to accept this responsibility, we often fall into the seductive trap of victimhood. In our modern, hyper-connected world, there is a pervasive culture that rewards outrage and moral superiority. It has become incredibly easy to project our insecurities onto external forces. We blame the economy, our parents, or society at large for our internal discontent. This phenomenon provides a fleeting, addictive high of righteousness. It feels validating to point fingers. However, this avoidance of personal accountability is a profound disservice to our own growth. By constantly casting ourselves as helpless victims, we surrender our power to change. We forget that while we cannot always control what happens to us, we possess absolute control over how we interpret those events. To claim that you have no choice in your reactions is, in itself, a choice to remain stagnant. As we begin to take ownership of our lives, we must also confront the fragile nature of our own beliefs. We walk through life assuming that our perceptions are accurate and that our values are objectively correct. But the human brain is a flawed, biased machine, constantly rewriting history to protect our ego. We are, almost by definition, wrong about almost everything. The danger arises not when we are wrong, but when we become absolutely certain that we are right. Pure certainty is the breeding ground for entitlement and arrogance. When individuals are utterly convinced of their own righteousness, they become incapable of learning or empathizing. They build impenetrable walls around their identities, avoiding any information that might challenge their worldview. This leads us to a fascinating psychological rule: the more something threatens your core identity, the more you will avoid it. We cling to our familiar miseries because the unknown feels like a threat to who we believe we are. To break free from this paralysis of certainty, we must radically redefine our relationship with failure. Society conditions us to view failure as a stop sign, a humiliating reflection of our inadequacy. We are taught to avoid it at all costs, which ultimately leads us to avoid taking any meaningful risks. But if we look closely at anyone who has achieved success, we see a sprawling graveyard of mistakes. Improvement is simply the accumulation of thousands of tiny failures. When we strip away the ego and accept that we are perpetually works in progress, failure transforms from a source of shame into a vital source of data. Yet, knowing this intellectually does not always make it easier to take the first step. We often find ourselves trapped in procrastination, waiting for the mythical spark of motivation to strike before we take action. We mistakenly believe that inspiration leads to motivation, which in turn leads to action. But this chain reaction is entirely backward. When you find yourself paralyzed by the weight of a problem, waiting for the perfect emotional state to arrive, the most effective strategy is to simply do something. Anything. This is the essence of the do something principle. If you lack the motivation to write a book, write a single, terrible sentence. If you are too anxious to go to the gym, just put on your shoes and step outside. The simple act of doing creates a feedback loop. The action generates a result, which in turn sparks a new emotional inspiration, which then fuels further motivation. By lowering the barrier to entry and focusing purely on the act of doing, regardless of the outcome, you bypass the emotional bottleneck. You stop waiting for life to feel good before you act, and you start acting to make life feel meaningful. It is a profound realization that we do not need to feel ready to begin. We only need to begin, and the readiness will eventually follow. Let us now turn to the profound necessity of drawing lines in the sand, of learning the vital art of saying no. Imagine a life where you say yes to everything, where you travel the globe chasing endless novelty, refusing to commit to a single place, person, or purpose. It sounds like absolute freedom, but as the narrative reveals, absolute freedom without boundaries is entirely meaningless. True meaning only emerges when we actively reject alternatives. To value anything, you must consciously choose to reject what is not that thing. This is where the concept of boundaries becomes the bedrock of our emotional health. Consider the cultural contrast between the blunt, unfiltered honesty of Russian interactions and the polite, often superficial niceties of the West. While Western culture often prioritizes appearing agreeable to avoid conflict, this very avoidance destroys genuine trust. Healthy relationships are not built on two people trying to escape their own problems by merging into one another. Instead, they are built on clear boundaries, where each person takes full responsibility for their own issues while supporting the other. When boundaries blur, we fall into toxic dynamics of victims and savers, using each other for emotional validation rather than genuine connection. Trust, the most vital ingredient of any bond, cannot exist without the willingness to be honest, to face conflict, and to hear the word no. Without the friction of occasional rejection and the courage to speak uncomfortable truths, a relationship is merely a fragile illusion maintained by people-pleasing and manipulation. This brings us to the paradox of commitment. In a consumer-driven world that constantly whispers that more is always better, we are paralyzed by the sheer volume of choices. Yet, pursuing an endless breadth of shallow experiences ultimately leaves us empty. It is only when we commit deeply to a single craft, a single partner, or a single community that we unlock the profound rewards of depth. Commitment does not restrict our freedom. Rather, it liberates us. By consciously rejecting the trivial and the frivolous, we hone our focus, eliminate the anxiety of missing out, and direct our energy toward what truly matters. We find freedom not in keeping all our options open, but in firmly closing the doors to everything that does not align with our core values. Finally, we must confront the ultimate reality that frames and gives weight to every single choice we make, our own mortality. The narrative shares the deeply personal and tragic story of a friend named Josh, whose sudden death by drowning served as a violent awakening to the fragility of life. Staring into the abyss of his friend's passing, the author realized that avoiding pain and embarrassment was essentially avoiding life itself. This confrontation with death echoes the profound insights of anthropologist Ernest Becker, who argued that human civilization is largely driven by our terror of mortality. To cope, we construct immortality projects, dedicating our lives to values, legacies, and beliefs that we hope will outlast our physical bodies. But when we cling too tightly to these conceptual selves, we become dogmatic, entitled, and disconnected from the present. The ultimate liberation comes only when we step right up to the edge of the cliff, metaphorically or literally, and accept our inevitable demise. When we truly internalize that we are going to die, all the superficial, fragile, and ego-driven values we once clung to instantly evaporate. What remains is a clarion call to care about something greater than ourselves. Happiness, the book concludes, is not found in the endless pursuit of personal comfort, but in the humble recognition that we are but a small part of a vast, unintelligible universe. By embracing our mortality, we strip away the fear that paralyzes us, allowing us to live with courage, authenticity, and a profound sense of purpose. We step back from the edge, not with terror, but with a quiet, exhilarating realization. We are alive, and that is more than enough.